I'm thrilled to introduce Professor Bill Swartat, who has been involved in research and development of artificial intelligence systems for over 30 years. He is the Chief Technology Officer at the USC Institute for Creative Technologies and a research professor in the Computer Science Department of the USC Vertebrae School of Engineering. I have been so personally inspired by the work he's doing in virtual humans and their potential impact on healthcare, education, and so many aspects of our lives. He's really been a thought leader in the space, helping us to understand where the future of this technology can lead us. So much about artificial intelligence we're grappling with in this conference at MedAI, trying to understand, how these technologies could potentially be misused, the ethics behind them, how they could be positively used to usher in a new kind of golden age for humanity. And I can't think of anyone better than Bill to help us on that journey of understanding. So I'm so thrilled he was able to join us here today. And please join me in welcoming my friend Bill. And Bill, I'm going to leave it to you to walk us through the future of humanity in some ways.
Thank you so much for what a kind introduction. I'm going to start by sharing my screen here. And if the technology is good, we should be there. Okay, you should be seeing my screen now, right?
Yep, we've got it.
Okay, great. So I'm going to be telling you about some work we've done at the Institute for Creative Technologies on developing virtual humans. And so, what are virtual humans? Well, virtual humans, I'd like you to imagine a world with simulated characters that are autonomous. That is, they think for themselves. They're using AI. They perceive their environment. They interact in a fluid, natural way using verbal and nonverbal communication. And they do things like model what they believe, what others believe, their intentions. Importantly, they exhibit emotions. And if you think about AI research, most of AI research has really been concerned with trying to create terribly clever agents. So something that can beat you at a game of chess or now even Go. But not much attention has been paid to to having emotions for AI or understanding how it works. It turns out as soon as you put something that looks like a person up on a screen and have it interact with people, people immediately start ascribing emotions to it. So you have to really model that, and we've really pushed the envelope on that because you don't want to unwittingly give erroneous information about emotions. And you have to do it all in a coherent, integrated fashion. So one of the things that I think virtual humans bring to the table is they really provide a new metaphor for how we might interact with computers. We've been using the Windows mouse desktop metaphor for a very long time. If you think about interacting with your computer as being like having a conversation with another person, a virtual person, it really means that the computer interface, as we typically think of it, kind of goes away. Interestingly, also, studies have shown that people react to virtual humans much like they do to real people, with some notable exceptions. And I'll hit on those exceptions because they're important in this talk. The other thing is that virtual humans add elements to an interaction that previously have been missing. So things like you can actually use virtual humans, and we've demonstrated this, to create rapport with people. They can exhibit excitement or passion about a particular topic or situation, and they can exhibit social cues like appropriate gestures and facial expressions and things like that cue people in to what's going on at a more subliminal level than what you would get by just a textual interface. So I want to tell you, we've done a lot of work in building a wide variety of different kinds of virtual humans that range all the way from being role players in simulations to acting as coaches. Here, I want to tell you about some work we did on using a virtual human as a sort of virtual intake nurse. The idea is this is a character that would do an initial interview with somebody who might have PTSD, show signs of PTSD or depression. the system has a rich perception of the user. It's not just listening to what they say, but it's also using computer vision to track things like facial expression, using sensors to pick up body posture, tracking their voice, picking up the prosody of the voice. Do they sound depressed? Do they sound happy? And also using speech recognition to understand the content of some of what they're saying. Turns out that speech recognition, although you would think that would be a really big part of this, it actually turned out to be less of a major part than we thought it would be. On the output side, the character appears as an embodied character and is using nonverbal gestures to build rapport, such as head nods, mirror gestures, which means, for example, when the subject smiles, the agent smiles back, using body movements to create engagements and so forth. And this is a kiosk-based system that when we've been testing it, it's been done in a clinical setting. It's not something that is really ready to be put out in the wild.
Bill, I just want to stop you for a second because I think you're going through some slides, but we're only seeing still the first one. So we haven't gone through, we haven't seen any of the slides. We've heard everything, but we haven't been able to see them. So I want to test to see if we can just make sure that the slides are coming through properly. And maybe let me try that one more time.
Sharing here and try sharing again.
It's always fun at a conference when the technology is the problem, right? So that's usually the way they're wrong. So.
Okay, so you should see my first slide now, right? The title slide?
Yes, we can see your title slide perfect. So let's see if we can move
Do you see the next slide?
Yep, we're working through them now. Yep, we can see them now.
Okay, and you should see this slide about the metaphor.
Correct.
Okay, and this is where we were.
Perfect. Okay, great. It seems to be working.
Okay, so the next slide will be actually a video, and I'm first going to describe it and then play it. So if there's a problem with that, let me know. Okay, so this is the sensei system that I was talking about, and on the right side you see the virtual character that the person would have seen in interacting with the when they're interacting with the system, and on the left side you see essentially a dashboard view of the subject, the facial recognition, measures of body activity and gaze attention and things like that, and other metrics that the system is using to figure out not only what's going on with the patient, but also figure out how to frame its responses that it gives in a contextually sensitive way. Okay, now I'm going to try playing the video. So hopefully this works, and let me know if we've got a problem.
Hi, I'm Ellie. Thanks for coming in today. I was created to talk to people in a safe and secure environment. I'm not a therapist, but I'm here to learn about people and would love to learn about you. I'll ask a few questions to get us started. And please feel free to tell me anything. Your answers are totally confidential. Are you okay with this?
Yes.
So, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well.
That's good. Where are you from originally?
I'm from Los Angeles.
Oh, I'm from LA myself. When was the last time you felt really happy?
When was the last time? I don't know. Yeah, I'm not someone who's really like, I don't have any real highs. I feel like I'm a level person. It's just happy. I guess to answer your question, probably a couple months ago.
I noticed you were hesitant on that one. Would you say you are generally a happy person?
I'm generally happy. It's just lately there are things just keeping me down.
Can you tell me more about that? When was the last time you felt really happy?
But I try to stay happy. I'd rather be happy. My kids keep me going.
What advice would you have given yourself 10 or 20 years ago?
To not believe, to not be so gullible, to not be so gullible.
Yeah.
I've been told recently that I have a tendency to believe people too readily without them having to prove anything. And so as a result, recently I've gotten myself in a lot of trouble. And so I think that looking back, if I could have, I would tell myself to not believe, to not be so stupid, and to think, and just to not be so gullible.
Is it uncomfortable for you to talk about this?
Yeah, it is. I hadn't really thought about that.
So one of the things that we were doing when we were putting this system together is it uses machine learning to try to characterize whether people seem to be depressed or possibly showing signs of PTSD. And we brought a number of subjects through the lab to have them test the system and to build up the expertise of the machine learning as a result of the data that was gathered. One of the things that happened is we overheard people, the subjects, sometimes talking among themselves, and they said things like, gee, have you interacted with the virtual human? It's really interesting. There's kind of no judgment. And we realized that it may be that people were more comfortable in talking to this virtual character than they would be to a real person. So we did a follow-up study and found that when you actually do it with a control group, that people do actually reveal more to virtual characters or to a character that they think is driven by an AI than they do to a character that they think is driven by a real person. So this is very interesting, and it suggests that we may be able to get more accurate information or more information out of a virtual character interview than we could when people go in and speak, to a human physician or caregiver. It's basically the idea that, when you go to see the doctor asks, and so you've been getting exercise appropriately. Everybody says, yes, I've been doing tons of exercise, when in fact, maybe they haven't, because they want to preserve their image with the physician. When you're dealing with a virtual character, that sort of goes away. The other thing that affects this is also the nonverbal cues, the gestures, head nods, and so forth, that create engagement and rapport. And these effects, I think, work together to create a character that people are more likely and more willing to disclose to. We also did a study with the Colorado National Guard where we had 29 participants who were, before they deployed, we interviewed them with sensei. And when they came back, we interviewed them again. And they also, after deployment, they completed a standardized form called the Post-Deployment Health Questionnaire that looks for signs of PTSD or depression, asks you questions like, have you had sleep disturbances? Have you had other issues? And the character I'm about to show is one of the soldiers who returned. What I'm showing you is the interview that was done with some sensei. I apologize for the sound quality, it's not great. But before being interviewed, she had filled out a health questionnaire and said basically no to everything. Nothing was going on. This is what happened when she was interviewed by sensei.
Can you tell me about any bad dreams you've had about your pieces, or times when thoughts or memories just keep going through your head when you wish they wouldn't?
Sure, one of those. Wake up thinking I'm dying, yes. Thinking I'm on fire, sure. Thinking I didn't get out of my vehicle, yep. Thinking that I left a guy stuck in a vehicle, yep.
So a very different story when interviewed by the virtual character. And we see a lot of issues coming out in this patient. This wasn't an isolated example. Overall, what we found was the people who were interviewed by sensei reported more symptoms that were on the health questionnaire, even when, as you see in green there, the health questionnaire was made anonymous. These differences, all the differences here are statistically significant. So this again shows that this kind of technology can really be useful in getting perhaps a more accurate picture of what's going on with a patient. Wrapping up, some other uses for virtual human technology that are related that we think could be important is in the area of telemedicine. Imagine using the sensing technology, the video analysis, voice analysis technology that was used in the virtual character that I just showed, to provide a sort of virtual assistant or note taker for a clinician who's conducting a telemedicine session. Basically, it could be watching the video feed of the patient, noting, gee, they seem to be a little bit upset here, or, and bring this to the attention of the clinician afterwards. Say, did you notice, Dr. Smith, that right here, this seemed like a very difficult part of the interview, and bring out some of those things that might be otherwise missed by a clinician. The other thing we've done is use virtual characters or the virtual character technology to create virtual mentors. And these, in this case, what we do is we record actually real people answering questions about medicine, life issues, skills, life skills, or possibly people dealing with transitions. And then with that, the recorded video of the answers and the questions, we then use some AI and natural language processing to create a conversational capability where you can ask a question of this virtual character and see the recorded response that the person gave. And again, given that this is a AI system that people are interacting with rather than a real person, we expect people to be more likely to ask sensitive questions in this environment than they would in, for example, if they were dealing with a real person, or particularly in a group setting. So summing up, I think these virtual humans can really lower what might be called the conversational impedance that exists sometimes between people, resulting in better information flow. Having said that, I think there are ethical issues that need to be addressed, because we have to be careful how we're using this and how the data gets used on the back end. Once you've had an interview, you have to have assurances to people that the data really is going to be used in the way that they think it's going to be used, and not abused. So with that, I would like to end and open things up for questions.
Well, as always, Bill, that was, so inspiring. I feel the work you're doing, and, really kind of the problems you're trying to tackle are real and substantive problems that can help real people. So congratulations on just the work the Institute is doing in this way. You brought up so many things I want to just talk about while we have a few minutes. One, One is this question of why people are opening up more to the virtual being. Because on one level, we understand that they know that that same information is going to be shared. I mean, with the doctor, with the final person. I mean, there's an illusion though, and I'm wondering if the fidelity of the actual character plays a part. Meaning that if it was too realistic, because there is a sense in Sim Sensei that she does look fake enough that that there's so I wonder actually, because we talked to a lot of people who are creating such lifelike virtual humans that are actually blurring the line completely, and will that actually blow backward? Meaning, will people have a disconnect with that because they'll feel more apprehensive versus what you're trying to do? So if you've done any studies into this, does actually making it look a little fake help people open up in a way that you wouldn't have anticipated?
We haven't done that study per se. We have looked at how much does appearance matter versus behavior. And we found that the behavior seems to be generally much more important than the actual appearance of the character. And so you can, as you're suggesting, dial the fidelity of the character back a bit, and it still works. One of the other benefits of dialing back the realistic appearance is that it can help you avoid something that's called the uncanny valley. And the uncanny valley is something that people who work in this area, have heard time and time again. It's basically the problem that if you get the character to look very realistic, but then it behaves in a way that looks awkward or somehow a bit out, people react very negatively to that. The best example I can give of that, unfortunately, is the movie Polar Express, which you may remember. The characters are almost realistic, but not quite realistic enough to really for people to buy in, and they come off looking a little odd. So that's something that you have to be careful about when you're doing these.
And did you find? I mean, I know the tests are. I don't know how wide you did on the tests, but was there a component of? Did you do enough A/B testing to do if it was a man therapist versus a female therapist, the voice, an accent? Were any of those factors tested out to really optimize, or could it be optimized for every individual in a very different way to get the most reaction? Does it make a difference? Or did it make any difference in any of the tests you did?
So in this particular experiment, we based the therapist character on a real life therapist person, and we tried to essentially mimic her gestures and movements in developing this character. So we didn't have the funding to do a lot of experimentation with different types and styles, but I think that is a really important area, and one that in the future is definitely going to be worth looking at. We know for example, from computer games that people get much more engaged if they can create their own characters in virtual environments. And so I would expect that the ability to choose your own interlocutor, the own character you're interacting with, will have a positive effect. For sure.
You touched upon one of the bigger issues we're trying to tackling here through this conference, which is the ethical ramifications as well, and particularly with this type of very personal data. And there's two levels to that, right? There's one which is, I think, the macro data that you would have. Let's assume that this goes on a scalable position where people all around the world are having access to this virtual character in a healthcare capacity, and really kind of having very personalized experience. There could be an argument said that the macro data, not individualized, but that macro data could help all of the interactions become even that much better, right? Because AI would learn from that bigger data set. As a technologist, as a professor, I mean, how do you draw that line of what kind of access to information should be allowed to get the technology to actually have such big data sets that it can improve every individual experience versus where should it just be gated at every level?
Yeah, I think that that is a big issue for AI in general, and the issue is how can we build systems that learn from data while still preserving the privacy of people's data, and different what we see on the corporate world is that different companies, for example, have taken very different approaches on that. Some are much more willing to, use all the data they can get. Others have tried to build these barriers. I think ultimately the approaches that I'm much more in favor of the ones that use basically firewalls or some sort of barrier that filters what can get through, even if that may result in something that's not quite as not quite as effective in terms of the machine learning. I think there are things we have to adhere to there.
Yeah, it's an incredible challenge, right? You can see how other countries, may become faster at solving hard problems with AI and using AI in healthcare because they are basically demanding such data or taking such data and using it pretty quickly. And we may be in a handicap if we don't have that access to data to be able to solve. And you could even when you get to simple things like cancer detection or other things that are real tactical. Quick responses. So is there do you think that there should be policy involved here? There should be some sort of, governmental approach to looking at AI versus having tech companies themselves really kind of following their own rules most of the time and figuring things out?
I personally think that, a enlightened policies would be really helpful in this area, because I think it also helps to level the playing field for the companies, so that they're all basically playing to the same rules.
Right. And I think even on a global level right now, I think that AI is moving so fast that every country has its own way of thinking about it. Every company has its own way of thinking about it. And unfortunately, there is not a unified sort of global ethical standards that we're all trying to figure out. So those are things that I'm sure you're thinking about as well. But,
No,
yeah, one of the questions I would say is, I know part of your big focus at the lab also is thinking about, virtual humans and virtual beings in the case of education as well, right? And where do you see, separating out the healthcare side of it, while they are intertwined in some way, what do you think is the future of education with these types of virtual humans?
So one of the things that we've done for education is used virtual characters as a way of creating a sort of coach that can help you in, for example, navigating curriculum as you're going through it, provide encouragement. And these aren't always necessarily humanoid characters. Sometimes these are just characters that are embodied and can talk to you and so forth. But they try to engage you with the subject, provide encouragement, and let you know that you're doing well, or encourage you when you're maybe not doing so well. Another thing is the virtual mentors that I was talking about, and these are characters. Essentially, they're recordings of real people, but they're people who've been through something that maybe you are about to go through. So, you are, let's say, in the Navy, and you've completed all your land-based training. You're about to go out in the fleet. Wouldn't it be nice to have somebody to talk to about what that experience is like before you actually go through it? And one of the problems that often happens when you get into a group setting and there's somebody in front of the group and is there to provide advice or whatever about things is people are reluctant to ask questions because they don't want to seem either stupid or they don't want to ask an embarrassing question or whatever. If you've got this running on your cell phone, which we can do now, then you can ask all those questions, in the privacy of your own room, And I think this is lowering what I've been calling the conversational impedance. I think these can be useful things.
Oh, fantastic. And I'm going to give you the final word. Anything that you think we should all think about as we enter this new age of virtual humans in our lives?
So I think, I personally think, I do think that these do provide a new metaphor for how we will interact with computers. And while, if you're writing a document, you're still going to want to use Word, and a mouse and Windows is just fine for that. For some of these other uses, for more intimate interactions, more conversational consultation kinds of settings, I think virtual humans ultimately will have a significant benefit for these interactions.
Well, Bill, I want to commend you for your work again, and just thank you again for taking the time to be here with all of us.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you. Very much appreciated.